My name is Aysha Khalid. I'm a doctoral researcher at the Nottingham Trent University. As you can tell from the title of my presentation, my specialism is in Arabic typography with strong ties related to the calligraphic heritage of the Arabic language, the Arabic visual language. Should you be interested in me or my work at all, here is my blog and my email details. Let me start with a very brief journey back to the roots of Arabic calligraphy. It is a craft that dates back its relationship to Islam approximately 1,400 years. Islam's adoption of the calligraphic craft at the time Islam originated was what led creative and technical developments in the visual and the grammatics of the Arabic script. Looking at the image on the top left corner is an example of a manuscript that was used around the origination of Islam. This specific style of Arabic calligraphy was what became to be known as Kufic, and that name was given to the style by the Orientalists who studied the history of Arabic calligraphy. So the Orientalists weren't actually Arabs. In that specific image, there are no, in that top left-hand image, there are no dots to distinguish between individual letters that may look the same but sound different. There are several letters in the Arabic alphabet which look the same but are distinguished with the diacritical dot, and further are used with vocalization marks when used to spell words, so the reader pronounces the words correctly. This is evident in the bottom image, which is also Kufic script produced around 100 years later, so there's a 100-year difference between them. Duali was a grammatician who organized the visual vocalization of the Arabic script, which Arabic calligraphers then developed as part of the Arabic calligraphy structure. They used different colors and gold leaf to organize the visual reading page, and thus the ornamentation aspect of Arabic calligraphy and Islam was integrated. So if you can see the differences between the two, there are no dots, diacritical dots in that image, whereas there are in here. And this system of organizing the page was started by a grammatician called Duali. Further, 100 years later, about 200 years later, realizing the practical visual limitations of Kufic, a man by the name of Ibn Muqla is acknowledged for founding the Al-Iqlam al-Sitta. This is the name of the 6 new cursive calligraphy styles, which were a huge visual contrast to Kufic that Ibn Muqla originated. These 6 styles were based on 3 typographic structural systems, which this presentation will visually demonstrate further on as we go on. There have been a lot of academic debate on the cultural identity of the developing Arab Gulf states. Stuart Hall identifies that the Arab Gulf states may have the tendency to follow the westernization model rather than the modernization model. He presents the case of Turkey as a country which faces a lot of cultural conflicts between cutting itself from its heritage to modernization, to wanting to modernize. Halim Chihiri, who is an academic and an Arabic typographer, outlines that the Arab world is a region stuck between these 2 parallel ethoses, westernization and modernization. And that's why, as Paul Dress simply quotes, is that in order to have a clarity of a culture about itself, it should define that identity through its art and cultural aspirations, as it has the power to unite the people and represent itself to be progressive with itself. Studies have quantified the visual culture of the Gulf, have concluded the amount of westernizing and globalizing products and values that are overshadowing the Arab world's unique understanding of its own needs to progress with the world, rather the Arabs are allowing globalization and westernization to dominate their progress. On the international stage, Qatar has become to be recognized as a key player with its national wealth, its cultural and artistic aspirations and achievements. 2013, this year, is the year of Qatar and UK political and trade economy relationships. So as you can see, there are several franchises that function within Qatar which talk about its relationship with the West when it comes to economy and politics. When it comes to its cultural and art-related aspirations, Qatar has been recently making headlines in the art and culture world with the opening of the Museum of Islamic Art and the Museum of Modern Art. Islamic art is the one on the left, and on the right is the Museum of Modern Art. This has been complemented with the purchase of world-renowned paintings and cultural establishments like the InQ Cultural Shop that was founded in Harrods after the Qatar royal family purchased Harrods in 2010. Much of the art and culture-related accomplishments are headed by Sheikha Mayasa Al Thani, the sister of the currently newly appointed Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Let's take a closer look at how this cultural influence has been reflected through the state logos. The emblem on the left is the old Qatar logo, designed around the 1970s when Qatar became an independent state. The Arabic reads State of Qatar and uses the Kufic calligraphy style. It is matched with a black letter Old English style of font. It uses images of a dhow, which is a wooden ship used for pearl divers in Qatar, two swords and a palm tree. On visual examination of the designer has given little consideration to visually complementing the English and the Arabic fonts to create a similarity in the visual statements of that national emblem. If you look at the logo that was commissioned on the right, that was commissioned to be designed by Tariq Atrisi, a Lebanese graphic designer, you can see a lot more visual consideration has gone into designing the logo. The designer has used a specific calligraphy style called Diwani and complemented the Arabic with the Baskerville font in English. He has used the blue to pay homage to the pearl diving heritage of Qatar and used different colors to represent different cultural values of Qatar. Although as a typographer myself, I have issues with the visual graphic settings of this logo. However, it is very vivid evidence that Qatar aspires to cultural values and associates them with a refined calligraphic heritage. The logo for the Arab Museum of Modern Art was commissioned to Wolf O'Leans, which is an international graphic design firm, and further two typefaces of the museums were commissioned. The typeface on the top right-hand side was commissioned to another Lebanese graphic designer, typographer, Pascal Zohbi, and the bottom one again was designed by the same gentleman who designed the Qatar national logo, Tariq Atrisi, who is also Lebanese. They used both those typefaces in parallel to each other. So depending on whether it's to do with street art, they use the bottom one, and when it's to do with the branding or the corporate identity, to use it for those needs, they use the top typeface. Tariq Atrisi, the bottom one, when he designed that, he used a lot of mixed media to design that logo, because although that's written in English, that also has an Arabic font to it as well. So there are two fonts of the same one. Now with Arabic, if you all recognize, is a ligature-dependent script. So it needs ligatures to connect the letter forms together to make words. Now the problem that he had with creating a typeface like the bottom one was that he said that because it's a handwritten style, visual style he was going for, it became very difficult for him to produce this font so it could go into the Unicode and into the computer systems, and for them to recognize the ligatures and place them so that the two letters wouldn't be next to each other as off, they would fit together properly. Am I making sense? Is there any confused people? So that's one of the things that has always been an issue with Arabic typographers that they've had to face, is that the organization of, handling Arabic letters is very difficult. And further, as I go along in this presentation, you will realize that there are further issues when it comes to the visual styles of Arabic in a modernizing Arab world, how challenging they can be for an Arabic typographer. The top, before I finish, go off this page, the top logo was designed by Pascal Zogby, as I've previously mentioned. He used that typeface and he based the design of that typeface on Kufic, which was the original image that I showed you earlier on. He based that on Kufic because it gave him the visual spacing in between the letters. So if you have a look at there, so that there was breathing space in between the letters, but because Kufic was quite a thick typeface, he used thinner lines to create some to relieve some visual density that was on the page. Other logos that have been developed in Qatar or have been designed and associated to Qatar have also included a huge calligraphic presence. For example, the Al Jazeera, we're all familiar with the Al Jazeera logo and the Al Jazeera channel. That is a very calligraphic heavy logo. The game Spirit of Doha, the Asian Games, which were held, I believe, in 2006, that was the typeface on the left-hand side. That was the typeface that was designed by Tariq Atrisi again. He has had a lot of commissions when it comes to typography and visual design in Qatar. That was designed by Tariq Atrisi, and that was also based on an Arabic calligraphy style. And he tried to challenge the way that the flicks at the end of the letters, how they would fit in when it came to legibly being able to read the words and being able to recognize the letters. The Qatar Airways, if you look at the Arabic of the Al-Qatariya, that again uses, I've done a lot of research, that again uses the Kufic style as the calligraphy style in the Arabic part. The InQ the InQ Culture Shop, which is in Harrods, they've tried to, what they've done in the InQ shop, if anybody's visited, is that the Museum of Modern Art and the Islamic museums in Qatar at the moment, whatever material and books that they are producing, InQ shop is the only place that you can buy them. And the whole purpose of the shop is to introduce people who come in, visitors, to a little bit about Arabic and especially Qatari life and Qatari art and culture and where Qatar stands when it comes to its presence in the world. Again, in their logo, they've tried to use the thicks and the thins and the pen line, the way that the axis of the pen is when you move in calligraphy form, because when you are writing with calligraphy, typically your pen has to be at an axis, because calligraphy was typically written by a nib that was flat at the end, and it had a thickness to it depending on what the calligraphy style a particular calligrapher was going for. So they've used, again, that similar sort of principle, but they've come up with a product or with a design that's quite challenging in the, to stand as a cultural statement in a different country, in a Western country. Again, here are more logos that were designed with a lot of calligraphic influences within them. The oryx is associated with Qatar Airways. That was again designed by Pascal Zohbi, who tried to use a lot of calligraphy, especially Diwani style of Arabic calligraphy, to represent the oryx as a Qatar-related brand. Qatar is a bilingual state due to the overwhelming balance of immigrant population. All communication happens in Arabic and in English. This image visualizes briefly the visual culture that exists in Qatar between the wealthy and the lesser affluent streets, where Louis Vuitton uses a modernized version of Arabic. The local butchery business uses the Kufic calligraphic font for Arabic. This is one example that demonstrates that the local and the native attachment to calligraphy Qatar's natives still have. Going back to Arabic calligraphy, if you remember, I said Ibn Muklak came up with three systems for constructing Arabic calligraphy. The one on the top left is the rhombic dot system, Nizam al-Nuqat. The one on the right is the system based on a circle, and the one on the bottom left is the system based on similarities. Now these are very important systems because it gave a consistency. If you imagine, if you're a calligrapher, your hand can go in any direction, whichever. If you don't have a boundary, a visual boundary in which you are writing those letters, it becomes a page that is visually very messy. So in order to control this visual mess, Ibn Muklak came up with these three systems so that every letter written in a specific calligraphy style would have a consistency within the page. Now, these calligraphic styles are still, before that, however, calligraphy poses its own issues. These three systems are the systems for writing calligraphic letters for calligraphers to proportionalize visual styles and design a character set with consistency. As Arabic letters have isolated forms, and when they are written in words, they have to be designed with the initial forms, with the isolated forms, initial forms, medial forms, and final forms. So a typographer has a huge task of duplicating every character set. So he has to basically design the entire Arabic alphabet almost about 4 times. And that, on top of that, you have the numbers, and on top of that, you have the punctuation marks. These calligraphic systems are still being used by Arabic typographers today. They argue that Arabic typography either has no visual system suitable for modern technology, or either they break away entirely from the calligraphic heritage. This is a notebook sketch from Nadine Shaheen, who's an Arabic typographer. She designed, Palatino is a Latin font, is an English font. She works for Linotype, and she designed the Arabic version of Palatino. To design the Arabic version of Palatino, she reverted back to Ibn Muklak's Arabic calligraphic structures to be able to understand a little bit about how to transition that Latin visual style into the Arabic visual style. One thing, though, that comes through from this research and becomes very apparent is the fact that Arabic typography, which is the standard classification used for mass communication, has a lot of research to find. Exploration for visual styles, explorations for readability and legibility. The work on the left is from a PhD thesis written by, again, the typographer Nadine Shaheen, whose PhD has been specializing in readability and legibility developments, possibly to progress Arabic typography. However, like a lot of Arabic typographers, I question her sincerity to the purity of understanding Arabic as a visual language. Shaheen, as I've said before, works for Linotype and has produced Arabic versions of several English fonts. And that's placed, in my eyes, in my research, that's placed Arabic at a passive position when it comes to understanding her career as an Arabic typographer. This has become much of a trend, and that's carrying forward a westernizing threat for Arabic typography to flourish with its own unique integrity. There are several Arabic fonts available on the market. There is a lot of creative critique to their technical quality and their visual styles, whether they are progressive uniquely for a developing Arab world. On the right of the screen are Nadine Shaheen's character sets designed with Linotype. She's designed Helvetica Arabic, Universe Arabic, Palatino Arabic, Frutiger Arabic, and several other Arabic versions of Latin typefaces. As a typographer, it is shocking to find how limited the rules of Arabic typography are. This diagram shows you a few, and actually there are perhaps a few more terminologies and structures than this diagram. As a researcher that I have issue with, these structures classified here are based on the Latin typographical system that have become common use within Arabic typography. This hints at outlining the issues that the transition between Arabic typography and Arabic calligraphy has led to the confusion for Arabic typographers to understand, and rather they treat it with their naive understanding of the Arabic script, of the visual Arabic script. This research strongly finds that research in Arabic typography has a lot to establish, and although a puristic approach for Arabic calligraphy is not compatible for the technological or even visual development for a modernizing Arab world, however, there are several important systems and understandings that can be unearthed and developed to suit modern technology and visual culture. If this issue is in research, it further threatens to confuse to represent a cultural identity of a country like Qatar, which employs a huge number of non-Arabic speaking designers for their culture-related projects. That's why there have been calls for homegrown education and productivity for the creative and artistic culture to base brand Qatar on. And that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Aysha.
You're welcome.
Really good points regarding also nation branding somehow. And also thank you so much for sharing some of the secrets of Arabic calligraphy, although I think it's extremely complicated.
I was very reluctant to go into too much detail about several things because obviously the audience is quite broad, so it's very important to connect the issues and present the issue that typography and visual communication plays an integral role when it comes to the cultural reflections of a country, of a nation. And that's the point that I'm trying to research, that through typography, whereas Qatar is investing so much money into its culture developments, that typography is also equally as important. Yes, please.
Just excuse my ignorance.
Sure.
Would the typography be different? Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, they're all Arab countries.
Of
I
course.
would imagine one alphabet, but I'm curious, so would there ultimately, is the sense of this is a Qatari type of Arabic, or is this a Qatari type of Kuwaiti, or a Bahraini, or a Saudi? I'm not sure.
No, sure. That's a very valid question. Arabic in general, classical oral Arabic is basically universal. However, every country, this is the oral I'm talking about, however, every country, Bahrain, Jordan, Palestine, they each have their oral dialect. When it comes to Arabic typography, there isn't, because the Arab Empire went into different countries, it kind of, the calligraphy influenced each country in its own unique way. There was no specificness to one country or the other. Yes, you can typically, you can stereotype that, the Andalusi script, for example, the Arabic calligraphy script came from Morocco and southern Spain. However, I wouldn't say that there is still a consensus of this, division, which is a great thing. Because if a country in Qatar produces a great typeface, our other Arabic typographers in Lebanon, in Bahrain, in Jordan will be able to use it. And it unifies that education, that understanding of Arabic typography.
Why then is it a problem if the Lebanese guy is producing it and the argument about then you raise homegrown calligraphy?
The reason I say that, the reason I say criticize the Lebanese guys is because their understanding, although they are Arabs, what my point in making was, you might be Arab, it doesn't mean that you have the understanding it takes to design an Arabic script or an Arabic typeface. And from research of my own, I believe that some of the work that these designers, Lebanese designers, have produced, and it's nothing to do with region. It could have, their location is completely irrelevant. Whatever they're producing, I don't believe is quite culturally reflective, and it's quite westernized, and it's not productive for understanding for the practical industry. Whatever they design, whatever structures they come up with, because if you imagine that the structures of Arabic typography are very little and limited. So whatever other things that they come up with, the structures and visual styles they come up with, they're very reluctant to share them. They work in isolation. And that's a separate issue. This isolation within the designers, that it's my intellectual property. So that's why it's very important that there is this unity of research and education, which is what I'm trying to do with my foundation, is to promote research, a unified research, that, okay, it should come from the Arab world, Qatar, because my research specializes for Qatar. So I will locate my research from Qatar. And in the hopes that it expands and it stretches out to other Arab nations, so that they can learn from it, so that my point is that it needs to progress on its own without any influence or certain, I'm quite reluctant to use the word imperialism of the Western ethics of typography, but without the dominance of the Western ethics. That I'm a typographer who was educated from the Western ethics. I had to relearn everything and question myself, my practical practice. I had to question it, of how valid it is for a completely different script, and how can I actually unbiasedly develop the Arabic script itself. Sure.
How would you characterize the difference between Arabic culture and Islamic culture?
I think as time has gone on nowadays in the contemporary world, I think Arabic culture and Islamic culture are two very different things. No longer do we live in the world where the vintage Arab world was thought of as the Islamic world. As a professor, Helen Hillenbrand, she said that it's naive to consider that the Islamic world is the Arab world, because there are Muslims in Malaysia. There are Muslims in India. There are Muslims all over the world. There are Muslims here in Britain who are not Arabs. But because the language of Arabic is related to Islam, it should be considered as related to Islam. But because the history dates back to the Arabs and Islam, it's important to learn from that so you can unify it for a progressive Arab world. So my research is for the Arab world, not the Muslims specifically. Because that's a whole different other research, that how do you represent a new modernized Islamic script or a visual culture for the Muslims all around the world who are not Arabs. Yes?
How can I, for example, in the street or in a different event, can we rely that this is Arabian and Muslim?
You would be able to, if you can read the script, depending on what it says, you would be able to tell whether it's Islamic or whether it's Arab. The thing is, because until quite recently, those two have gone hand in hand. Arabic and Islamic have gone hand in hand, and it's as in together. They're always been associated as one thing. Islamic culture and the Arab culture has always been associated as one thing. And until recently, as other Muslims in the other parts of the world have come, sort of like said that, it's different. We're not Arab, so that doesn't represent us. What represents us is an Islamic visual culture. So it's come down to the fact that, okay, what is it that you're reading? Let's just associate Arabic for Arab world. And if it's in Arabic, but it says an Islamic thing, let's associate it with an Islamic thing. So you have to, there's a duplicity within the script now that needs to be understood, that it has one visual communication, which you can see is Islamic, holds two things, Islamic and Arab. But what does it actually read? Can I distinguish between the Islamic and the Arabic? So it's something that's tricky. You have a valid point that, how do you differentiate between what you're reading between the Arabic and the Islamic? But unless you're a reader of the Arabic script, it's very difficult. I mean, you can be reading a Persian poetry, or you can be reading a Pakistani piece of work written in Urdu. But if you can speak Arabic or if you can read Arabic, you should be able to read those. And if you can read, like for example, before I started to take on this research, because I'm Muslim, my parents always taught me how to read the Quran, how to read the Arabic letters. I had no understanding of Arabic. I was taught in British systems, and I had no understanding of what I was reading. And that's another issue. So unless you can understand what you're reading, you can't distinguish whether it's Persian, whether it's Urdu, whether it's Arabic, whether it's Islamic. Does that make sense? Sure.
Thank you very much for your talk. And I think what's very, very interesting is that you bring up this, you brought up modernization, westernization, you brought up Turkey, and to sort of link it to the conversation we had about punching, about the way, I think it's fascinating the way Qatar has sort of also brought in the other scripts, taken the Latin scripts and sort of formed them to their own culture, which is of course the complete opposite of what Turkey did, because you will find that the majority of people cannot read their own cultural heritage because the manuscripts of Turkey are in Persian. And so when they took the Latin script, because they lost half of their culture there, whereas as opposed to Japan that we were talking about, and now from what I understand Qatar, they have adopted all this westernization, the technology. Qatar, fascinating, buying up so much of the Western world, but yet adapting all the best things and bringing them into their own culture. And I think you brought that out very effectively about how, that can be done. You can become modernized, westernized,
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so important. Like when recently the emir shifted to his powers to his son, and it worried some of the people, the new people, that although it's great, you know, a new generation, an emir who didn't last until his deathbed as the king, he's easily relinquished his throne for his son to make way, which in itself was quite a bold move coming from the Arab world. And I think when he came on, it was quite worrying that because he's young blood and he's Western educated, a lot of my old school friends, and especially their parents, they thought, you know, does that mean it's the end of modernization and we're just going to start Westernizing? There's still those questions prevalent that let's stay on this track of modernization, let's not divert onto a track of Westernization entirely. Absolutely, you're right. Out of a lot of the Gulf states, it is one of the better states that's progressed uniquely its own identity. I mean, if you compare it especially with Dubai, that's a completely westernized version of what Arabs or the Arab world is. Whereas Qatar, it's like about art and culture, buying up Edward Munch's Scream paintings and so many other paintings by huge artists, and spending millions and millions and billions of their own wealth on obtaining them as, you know, as representing that you don't have to be from a specific culture to own a painting that's from the West. You can be an educated intellectual within yourself. And I think once a nation has the ability to recognize that's definitely a sign of progress, rather than saying, oh, I must have this because look how great they're doing. No, there's can you see the difference between my terminology between those two things? You know, that's a very distinctive thing that Qatar has managed to make, and definitely through the visual culture, the visual communication, it's doing huge progress. I don't think I've seen an Arab country pay so much attention to a simple thing as typography in its national logos. And for them to commission it, fantastic. Any more questions?
Yeah, well, it will not be about calligraphy. I just wonder whether my interpretation is right. The fingerprint on the screen is of the shape of the state of Qatar on the map? Or
Yes, that is. Sorry, this image itself is from a magazine which Qatar publishes, I think, monthly, about what's happening economically and in terms of what's happening in the country, politically, debates and questions about those. So it's kind of like a digest kind of magazine, and it's just quite an interesting read about selling brand Q. Would you buy it? You know, so that's the question I'll end it with. Would any of you buy brand Q? Any more questions? Yeah, sure. Okay, in 2003, the country's tourism department commissioned Tariq Atrisi to design the logo. They wanted it to reflect a modernizing country with a rich heritage, which is why, let me actually take you back to the slide which has that. Sorry, bear with me for 2 seconds. Okay, so that one. They use, this script is known, the Arabic calligraphy script is known as Diwani, which is a very famous Arabic calligraphy style. Actually, a lot of its origins are, you know, or stereotypical origins are to be known to be coming from the Persian state, so Iran. But they used that specific calligraphy style, and they used, I don't know if you can see clearly, it's like a sea blue color, like a turquoisey blue color. And they used that because Qatar, before it discovered oil, it was a nation that was gaining a lot of its wealth from pearl diving. So there was a lot of pearls, and the wealth was coming from that trade. And that logo, the color of the letters of the logo was to come from that's what we originated from, and that's who we represent. You know, we were pearl divers, and that's where we got our wealth from. And the calligraphy style itself, Tariq Atrisi said that, you know, it was culturally quite sensitive, it had a modernizing twist to it, that it was quite refined and it was quite flicky, quite artistic. I personally have issues with him using those two styles of typefaces. That's Baskerville in font in Latin, and that's Divani, because I believe that they don't, stylistically, they don't say the same statements. Visual, if I talk about visual styles, they don't make the same statements. However, he tried to complement the flicks of the Arabic calligraphy with the flicks that are found in the quiff of the letter Q. So does that answer a lot of your questions? And also, do you remember I spoke about Kufic when the diacritical marks were brought in? I don't know if I can show you on here. When the diacritical marks were brought in, they used different colors. He tried to use those different colors as a modernized version within the logo as well, to symbolize that it was a revival and a modernization, yet very deep-rooted within its roots itself. Any more questions? Yeah?